Hello, my name is Lucy Ferriby Stocks, and I'm here as part of Royal 1251 AM and the Royal News Department, interviewing one of our lovely candidates for the presidential election this year for Warwick SU. So before I go on anymore, we are interviewing all the candidates, and hopefully you'll be able to have a look through the rest of our videos to see who else is running this year. But we should get down to business, who we're really here to talk to, and this is Shingai. Shingai, thank you for taking the time to join me and have a bit of a chat about you running for the election. How are you feeling? Are you doing all right?
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Such an honor and a privilege.
Oh, thank you for coming. It means I'm not just talking to myself, which is excellent. So we should probably get down to business. First of all, I have to ask, why did you decide to stand for office this year?
Wow, yeah, awesome. Thank you. You know what? I decided to stand for office this year because of the experience that I've had as a postgraduate officer. I think as a postgraduate officer, I've seen a lot of things within the SU that needed changing, seen a lot of things within the university that needed changing. And I finally built the relationship basis, both in the SU and the university, that can ensure that I make the necessary change. That's been very helpful. And then also there are some things that I think require personality like mine, a person who's strong-willed, who's strong-minded, who's independent thinking, because I wasn't really in the SU space until I became a postgraduate officer. And so I have really an outsider's perspective, even being an international student. The perspectives that I've realized that I have that are really relevant to this role. And why presidency in particular is because of the remit it gives me. Being a postgraduate officer, I literally only have access to education-based meetings with the university, which I think that should have been more diverse. As president, there's a wider remit that I have and more access that I'll be able to have in order to make both structural changes within the Students' Union and then key policy changes with the university. So that sums it up.
So you've mentioned a lot about why you want to run. What do you think makes you the right person to be president of Warwick SU?
Okay. So firstly, like I said, I have an outsider's perspective, and not only do I have an outsider's perspective, I've gained relationships and built relationships with whether it is the board of trustees and the SU, which a lot of students have complained about, and that has given me leverage to push certain concerns, whether it's with the directorship of the Students' Union, whether it's with the university. I've made many key relationships that allow me to leverage a lot of student relationships. That's the first thing. The second thing is that because I came from outside, the SU space, I think very independently, and that's allowed me to have a perspective that is of most students on certain matters. And I truly value ensuring that students are heard, because for me, my education means a lot. A lot of investments and sacrifices were made in ensuring that I come to university, and for many, university is a way out of many different challenges they may face. It's their first opportunity out. And so I want to ensure that students have what they require to make it out as successfully as possible. And that's a genuine thing for me. I actually care. And not only that, I'm very bold, and I stick to my guns when necessary. I'm a person who won't be pushed over or intimidated into making decisions that I don't believe are right. And so integrity is a big thing. And also, I think that's a big thing, integrity. I think integrity. I like to tell the truth. I like to tell people what is possible and work with them in achieving that, and then pushing boundaries beyond that. So I'm very transparent. I don't believe in trying to excite crowds, etc. I want to ensure that students getting what they're promised, and that means making promises to students that are achievable within the time frame I have in office. So I think those things about me make me a standout candidate, and I hope and hopefully a student body agrees with me.
It's very refreshing to hear about what you think makes you the ideal candidate for president of Warwick SU. And you mentioned some of the things you'd like to do, your priorities. You've got lots of things that you'd like to do as a result. So what would your top priorities be if you assume the office of president of Warwick SU?
So 4 things that I've highlighted, and this is amongst like so many, like my whole manifesto is like a manifesto of priorities, if I'm completely honest. And every single thing that I've put in my manifesto, I've identified as projects that I know need to be done. Projects are underway, but I know will take 2 years to complete. So there are things that I've started and want to complete, or things that other offices have started and we need completion, or things that I know are required at this specific time. So everything I've actually put in my manifesto is a priority in its sense. But the things that I know would really matter, first of all, a student consulted safe return to campus and in-person learning. I think this year has highlighted the role and the importance and the impact that in-person teaching has opposed to online teaching. I think the interaction has been different. Students have spoken about not having enough interaction over academic topics with their peers, not being able to ask questions as confidently, not being able to access materials in a way they would like to, apart from obviously recorded lectures, which is something we've wanted for a long time, and we're fighting to keep that because it has helped. There are things that in-person learning gives. So as soon as it is possible and soon as it is possible to go back on campus, I'd like to do that, but I would like to do that with the consultation or with consulting students, because I think it's important to hear you out. I think within that, it would also be important to maybe have an opt-out option in case there are those with concerns that they have of coming back on campus too soon, and that's okay. That's something personal. So I want to ensure that the university is thinking of those options. The second thing is fully operational library and study spaces. Now, there's been a song that the university is singing, that the library is singing, that, well, we have library services, but we don't have library spaces. But that's one of the key things that students need a library for. The resources in terms of access to desktops, to printers, etc. That is so important. Access to internet, to reliable internet. So the thing that I'm still pushing now and will continue to push, is for fully operational library and study spaces. Because right now the government guidelines aren't against library spaces being open, and there were some issues around safety that the university had raised, but I believe that there are ways around controlling it. For example, putting in bookable spaces throughout, and that way they're able to manage the volumes of people entering and where they're coming in. So there are things that can be done to ensure that the library is a safe learning space, and students who require those facilities have access to them. The third thing is financial support for home and international students. Now, that, for me, it's so important, because this has been a year that has been financially difficult for so many. I'm looking at things like the IT bursary being reintroduced. If the university is saying I know to IT support bursaries, then I'm really going to push for discounted rates, or for incorporating laptops into your university package. There's so many ways that can be packaged, and I think it's necessary, especially if they're going to keep going the online route. Then they need to make sure that the resources students need are available. A lot of times international students lose out a lot. In times COVID has hit every nation, most of the nations on this planet. And what that means sometimes is the inability to get finances on time, or there have been financial strains that are caused that didn't exist before a student came to university. And something many people don't know is that the hardship fund that's available to international students is like £300, and that is very little. You can do only so much with that. So I want to ensure that there's increased support for international students, but also there's a leniency the university can apply. I've heard of stories of international students who've missed their deadlines to pay school fees, and then maybe after they pay it, but the university is still processing for their visas to be revoked. What that means is they have to look for more money for a new visa, more money for another year of academics that they didn't have, and it becomes an unfair financial burden, when in fact the university can actually give more leeway. There's no reason why they can't. So I want to ensure that that is changed. And I don't think anyone ever has really spoken to the university about it until this year, when I started speaking to the university's registrar about it, and they started seeing firsthand the impact that this policy was having. So things like that. So I'm really excited. And also I want to widen the scope of the hardship funds and maybe even get the name changed, because I think the name itself is a barrier, because most students think, okay, am I really in hardship? Does this count as hardship? So getting that name change to something that makes it more accessible and making the scope of it wider, so what it allows. We've spoken to the university and they've been open to the idea of being available for maybe deposits for accommodation, things like that would be necessary for some students, especially as Warwick accommodation is gone. You find that maybe students from widening participation backgrounds would need that extra support because suddenly they have to pay a deposit and they may not have someone who's able to be there as a guarantor, and they may not have deposit money as well. So ensuring that that's sorted out is something that I've been looking at and working on, and the university has been showing great deal of support in sorting that out. And then the final thing, which I think is central, a student-focused SU. You know, the moment I got into the Students' Union, I noticed that there was discord, because as a postgraduate officer, I actually start after all the other sabbatical officers start. And at the time, I was also still finishing my master's, so I could only work part-time in September. So I was working half hours. Not only did I start in September, I was working half hours. But immediately, the first thing I came to is a broken down team. And I began to make proposals to the CEO, which were implemented and really have changed the relationship that we have as sabbatical officers. Not perfect yet, but nearing there. I think there are a lot of structural changes that need to happen within the student union in order for students to actually receive the care and attention they need. A lot of money has been lost attending to agendas that have nothing to do with the students themselves, because you have a small group of students who want to lead the agenda of the whole student union, which is unfair. And so I really want to make sure that the student union is disciplined and focused and bold enough to stand for what students need. You know, even small things like there are things where, you know, there were questions about the legality of the rent strike and whether it's possible for the SU to really back it. And I really stood for it because I was thinking this is what matters to students right now. And ensuring, you know, I put forward a case before, you know, that the directorship, the board of trustees, as to why this needed to be supported and backed. And that's something other sabbatical officers couldn't do, regardless of how close they were to the organizers. It's finally when I got to have a different angle and perspective and shed a different light to that situation, that certain changes were made. And those are the things that I enjoy doing. Those are the things that I like doing. So I think I want to ensure that internally, there's a student focus and there's structural changes that I would like to make and have been making that would ensure that happens. So I think that's something a lot of people don't think about, like, hey, what changes need to happen within the SU structures in order to make it more student focused.
This is touching on what I was going to go on to. I was going to say, you know, you talk about lots of the things you want to make things better for Warwick students, you want to make things better for the university, for campus, but going back to what you were talking about, the SU, what if, in short, what is one thing you aim to improve about the SU next year?
If I had to name one thing, it's the relationship between officers. I think there's something that I learned while studying my master's in innovation and entrepreneurship, and we have different modules that have to do with interacting with a lot of people. And it's when you find that people who tend to run, you know, positions such as this are, you know, people with a lot of ambition, people with great ideas, people who care about whatever it is that they're running for. And at times those ideals or personalities or agendas, they clash. But you have a group of highly talented individuals. And I genuinely do think that there wasn't enough support that was put in place to ensure that the sabbatical and the part-time officer team worked as a unit and brought the best out of each other. Because I even think, for me personally, I love challenges. I love being challenged on what I'm thinking. Why? Because even if I'm not going to change my stance, it helps me see the areas that I need to improve upon. And it helps me see the flaws in what I'm thinking. And that way I'm able to create something more robust and that is beneficial. And I think that's something that we never learned. So ensuring that we have the right kind of training right at the beginning of our tenures, and we have enough, you know, building. And I found that the more you get to know people on a personal level, the less likely you're going to have conflict that overflows. Why? Because you also care about the person. You realize how to separate issues from, people, and you know how to work about things in a respectful manner. So I think the way we work internally would have to change, but that has to do with a lot of support and giving the right type of skills training, which is what we've had now. And I got that implemented, and I also got a consultant who helped us with that, who has been lovely, and all the officers have said so. So hopefully they can come back again and work through a lot more with us before we start, if I'm to be re-elected. But yeah.
That's nice to hear. So you talk about making the SU more inclusive, more cooperative, but how would you aim to make campus as a whole a more inclusive space for the wider Warwick community?
Right. Thank you so much. I think it's understanding the different needs of students at a different level, and then making sure the individual elements of what students could engage with are working well. So you have students who naturally gravitate towards and always engage with the academic voice system. So those are course rep systems, etc. Making sure that they're tailored for each of the students and that they're working well. So for example, I found that the postgraduate system for academic voice representation doesn't really work well for the workload that PGRs have, that PGTs may have, or the timescales that they have for them to properly engage. So tailoring that and making sure that it works for them, whether it's sports, making sure that sports are working in a way that's dynamic, making sure those fees aren't so high, that they're reduced and they're kept low, and that the university doesn't try to, take over the sports agenda for its own pockets. So making sure that every aspect, societies are able to start, they're able to run, that students are able to get the funding they need to realize what they want to do within their societies. Those elements that the students' union represents and has the ability to represent, making sure that they all are visible and then they're working well, I think is important. And I think we need to work a bit more in terms of being proactive on certain aspects like well-being, sexual harassment, because those are issues that students are facing on hand. So learning to be proactive, put in place preventative measures, and thinking, where would students be? What kinds of students do we have? Almost like a chart. What kinds of students do we have on campus? And then what are we offering each of them? And then what aren't we offering them? And making sure that we're filling those gaps. So having a bit of a gap analysis and systematically attacking that. So yeah.
Well, you sound like an incredibly systematic person. You're looking for gaps, you're looking for niches, you're looking for things that people didn't expect. And one thing that nobody, I think, expected was a global pandemic. That seemed to catch us all off guard this year. If the COVID, you did touch on this slightly with your top priorities, but if the COVID situation does improve by term one, what do you think the teaching situation will look like? Our return to in-person. What should the teaching situation as a whole at Warwick look like with the effects of the pandemic?
So if what we're going through continues, I think there's going to be a need for a lot of lobbying at a national level, because the government needs to be more transparent. Because I think the whole thing of like day before, Monday, and coming up with all these things is a bit interesting. But I think what needs to happen is that the online offer needs to be improved greatly. A lot more support is required. And then having a plan of reintegration is going to be very important. I think the online space can be very disjointed. So you end up living in a bubble of whatever is on your team's calendar is there. And so I think there needs to be created like more community-based spaces where people get to meet each other, setting people up. I know Ollie Barron, our societies officer, had like a free friends speed dating thing. What did he call it? He had a name for it. Anyway, a friend speed dating thing where people get to meet each other. The society's officer the sports officer, pushed for a buddy system. I think those things also need to happen at a course level, because I found that we've had some, and this is like best practice methods that have gotten to be shared across the board in departments. So we found out during one of our SU meetings that, there was a particular teacher who set their students in groups, in study groups of 3 from the get-go. And the students were saying that was so helpful because they haven't felt the isolation of not knowing who to talk to, whatever. They've had that from the get-go. And so we've spread that knowledge across the board within the university so that it can be adopted. So those are key things that I think will need to continue in order to properly facilitate this. But then once we're going back on campus, there's going to be a need for reintegration because there are people who've not experienced in-person learning. That will be the story of most of the first years coming in. So we're going to have to make sure that courses are there to help them, ease in that. That welcome week, which is normally directed towards freshers, I think it's going to directed towards everyone because this year's freshers will be second years next year. So having an integration process will be important through that welcome week that is targeted at everyone, getting everyone settled in, getting everyone introduced to campus. By the time we come back, there are buildings that are going to be there that didn't exist before. So that opportunity to acclimatize to everything that's going on to in-person learning is going to be important. And I think the library can kick in with some of the courses that they do that are very helpful in terms of academic skills, learning how to take notes in lectures as opposed to on your screen. Those small things, because sometimes even the value of attending lectures in person can be lost. So reintegrating that into the system, I think, might be important. But keeping recorded lectures, I can't stress. I'm so happy. I didn't experience it, but I'm so happy for everyone who's experiencing recorded lectures.
Obviously, another thing that is, as well as teaching, that has been affected by the pandemic is students' mental health. And many believe the current wellbeing system at Warwick, it hasn't been able to deal with it and hasn't dealt with it adequately. So what would you do to solve what some are describing as a Warwick wellbeing crisis?
Wellbeing is so important, and that's one of the reasons I decided to be a postgraduate officer, is because of the personal experiences I had, and the support that I felt was lacking, both in the way my personal tutors would be, my supervisors were, and my department as a whole. And I truly believe that with wellbeing services, something that may help is starting to embed wellbeing within departments. So having designated either staff members who also work with maybe a team of students who are trained in that way would be important, and ensuring that personal tutors are trained beyond. I understand that there's a lot of talk about, personal tutors can't do everything, but I think there's a certain level of training they need to have in order to handle certain cases. So beyond just signposting, but they need to be equipped to know what to do when students are in a specific space, how to communicate. I think the university needs to be a bit more proactive about how students can be healthy, and that being streamlined on a departmental level. Because it's one thing for the well-being space to be doing so much, but it's just when you go to well-being, that getting that into departmental levels, faculty levels, and getting that message out to students. I think a lot of work has to be done on culturally competent care. Everyone in the university who I deal with knows that it's a song that I sing. And it's a song that I sing because I've seen how very often people, ethnic minorities or marginalized groups may feel a stigma towards approaching mental health and well-being services. Why? Because they're not catered to understand their realities. I think it's this year where we finally managed to secure, a change in the rules in terms of mitigating circumstances, where now the death of an extended family member can count. Can count towards mitigation, whereas before it needed to be immediate family, which is a very Western concept. Because for me, even language-wise, my mom's little sisters, I call them my moms, and them. So for one of them, God forbid, to pass away, that would be my mom going and my siblings. So the concept of family for us is very different. So if our well-being services don't even understand that very, basic concept, that means a lot of students are going to be losing out. So we need culturally competent care to be introduced within wellbeing services, and then to be integrated in the training for personal tutors. I think this year I had to get for mitigation, having them understanding, international students may not come to a place where, it's not volatile. For example, I come from Zimbabwe, and there was a particular instance where the government shut down all internet in the nation, and the army was just unleashed in the streets. I couldn't get telecommunication, I couldn't get a hold of my family for a whole 2 weeks. I couldn't get a hold of them. I didn't know what was going on, and people were being killed in the streets. And so that should be mitigating circumstances. But if they aren't conscious of the possibility of that happening in someone's country, in Uganda, the same thing just happened 2 weeks ago. So there are students from those places who are going through those things, and that should be mitigation, because that's impacting them. That should be recognized. So culturally competent care is so important, and that awareness that personal tutors, supervisors, and health services should have of those nuances that come with not being from here, or from being from a different background, in the United Kingdom. I think that's important.
It's incredibly humbling to hear you speak so passionately about these issues. And obviously, as I have mentioned previously, as you have, COVID is affecting every part of our existence as students. It's an issue. And one thing that I do obviously have to raise is talk about accommodation, because obviously we've gone for the academic, we've talked about well-being, but another key part of student life is who you live with and where you live. So obviously with Warwick accommodation coming to an end, and lockdown preventing students from going to house viewings and working out where they're going to be living next year, some are saying we may have a student accommodation disaster on the horizon. So what would your plans be to address this issue that is probably quite imminently arriving in the future?
So I think in terms of accommodation, there are a few things that are very important for me. Really negotiating with the university about work accommodation. Now, I understand the reason they had made the decision to withdraw the service, and was purely financial, but I think they can afford to give even a limited version of that of work accommodation, or bring it back completely. Reason being is because by virtue of having work accommodation or university connected accommodation means that in terms of when we want rent refunds, that can be done because it's within the university's control. When we're talking about, okay, can we revise the length, the tenancy, because students aren't going to be on campus, the university has control over that. Right now, we have so many students who were with private landlords, and the university doesn't have much remit apart from, the legal support they can give, and, the support that they can give, but then what more can they do when students are in a contractual agreement with these landlords? And so we're having to go at a national level, etc. So that can all be avoided if we have university connected accommodation available for students. And I think that has to be just put out there. Something that I thought would also be useful is for accommodation, especially with the university, for it to have a rent waiver clause. And that is something that I saw being done at the University of Greenwich, where actually if something like this happens again, we don't know what the government is going to decide. It's not in our control. In the event something like this happens again, that there's a rent waiver clause that students don't actually have to pay rent, and they can get their rent money back. I think that's so important. And I think that is only fair to be done, for the university to do. So I think that's something that's important. And for the students that are already rent striking, I think a lot more support needs to go behind them. I think legal support would be required to see what case can be put forward, because this was unforeseeable. And it should be addressed both at the national level, but also the university should actually see the position that these students are being in. And I think also giving them legal advice, because I think that's something that was missing, because it's one thing to be like, oh, we're rent striking, and for people to be cheering people on for rent striking and say, oh, we support you. But do you actually care about the legal position that you are putting that person in? And do you have a solution, a legal solution to get them out of that place? Or is it a lot of noise that you're making? And I don't see anyone thinking about that, which is why I was thinking, okay, what can be put into a contractual clause? What happens if we take away, we move more towards, university affiliated accommodation? It means contractually there's a lot more power, legal power for the university to maneuver than leaving students stranded, and we're stringing them along, and we're not thinking legally what can be done. So I think that for me is also important.
Yeah, that is something I was actually going to touch on next, because obviously the rent strike is likely to continue. So what would you do to help support these strikers? So obviously you talk about the legality side. Anything else you do to help support these people striking?
So another thing that I think needs to happen now, finally, that the Students' Union has been mandated to do it, is just ensuring that the Students' Union is actually backing them in the way they ought to. I know that they've had meetings with the SU, etc., but also then putting a case before the university for them to actually provide legal support for students. I think that's going to be required, because I think there is a case for it, and then lobbying it at a national level. So those three things are required. Now that we've had the SU as an organization that has to back it, now we have to get the university as an organization to back the students up, and then start getting information and actually helping them on how to practically work around it. I know we've, as an SU, we've already engaged ACON, which will be working with which students have been given the option to join them to become members of ACON, so that they can get more help with the cases that's before them. But I think the university, even if they can at least help with membership, payment of membership for ACON, if that's what they can do, that needs to be done, so that that financial burden is removed from students, and they're able to get the support they require in this matter.
So obviously, again, we've gone from accommodation, we've gone through education, we've talked about mental health, but again, another key issue that has sort of found itself on Warwick's campus, especially in recent years, is sexual violence. So should you be elected, what would you do to improve the Students' Union's response to incidents of sexual violence on campus?
So a piece of work that I'm working on with the SU Advice Center, and with the support of the wonderful Welfare and Campaigns Officer, Izzy Bourne, is a social policy, because I realized that a lot of projects were being run, and I thought they were so amazing. A lot of them by, like, for example, the Women's Officer, Amara. I really loved what they were doing, but I was thinking, what makes this beyond a response? What makes this go beyond being reactive and becomes a proactive approach? And for me, I thought, okay, let's put in place a social policy. So we're putting together a formalized group within the university, within the Students' Union, that engages with the university on creating campaigns and policies around how students are, and they will be in charge of ensuring, for example, that we're proactive with information. As a sabbatical officer, I've sat on disciplinary hearings, and some of them to do with sexual assault and sexual violence, and sometimes I'm shocked by the lack of understanding of basic principles such as consent. I'm honestly baffled that people can think the way they sometimes think. And so as a result, I think there needs to be more done to make sure that teaching trainings on consent, for example, are made compulsory in courses. Before someone steps onto our campus, there needs to be a knowledge, and there needs to be a testing of that knowledge, and it needs to be refreshed, if so on a termly basis. So that social policy would help guide that. And then ensuring that report and support is better expanded to teach the capacity of report and support is more expanded to handle the cases that are coming in a quick time. I know they've made some adjustments that have made it faster, but I think the process needs to be much faster, because the ordeal is a lot, and making sure that sanctions are strict. They're strict. I talk in part of my manifesto for minor offenses. I say, let's apply, more punitive approach, less punitive approaches. But with this, there needs to be a stricter approach. There are people who just shouldn't be on campus, and that there needs to be an approach that is very firm on that stance. So that's just in a nutshell what I've been thinking about that.
It is incredibly refreshing to hear you talk so passionately about this. And another issue that students have been campaigning a lot across the country, and even younger school children have been campaigning about over the past year, is the environment. And one issue and one thing the university have been pushing a lot is the idea of a carbon neutral campus. So how will you push for this to be for a carbon neutral campus at the University of Warwick?
Right. So I think the first thing is actually ensuring that the university has a plan that is set that meeting their targets. So I think a big thing for me will be actually ensuring that there's enough follow-up and review of the targets that the university has set, because I said, for me personally, 2025 would be a most ideal year for the campus to be carbon neutral. So seeing those tangible processes that the university has put in place and ensuring that they are sticking to them. I think this is one area where, as a sabbatical officer, we're kind of working as enforcement, and that's what I want to do, to ensure that what is said is being being done within the time frames that they're saying they would do it. I think there are other things that, in terms of the campus, that do need to happen, and that's pushing on the education side. So ensuring that sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Ensuring that sustainability and that understanding is embedded within the curriculum. I think a lot of students don't have enough knowledge around matters that concern the environment. So embedding that into the curriculum would be important. And sometimes people are like, okay, but how does it fit in with the course that I'm doing? But it can be a standardized course across the board, and contextualizing it where possible. So those are things that I have in mind, but really just really making sure on the enforcement bit, we're making sure the university is sticking to what they said they'll do within the timeframes that they said they'll do it.
Lovely. And obviously we couldn't come to the end of an interview with one of our presidential candidates without asking one of the really key and important questions. You know, we like to challenge everything here at Raw. So key important issue, what is your bread oven order? Now, obviously, this is a place that not many of us have been able to visit recently, but do you have a preferred bread oven order?
Oh my goodness, I do, but the name has escaped me.
Oh,
wow!
God. If not the name, what do you like? What are the ingredients that you like in your ideal bread oven?
Okay, I like tuna. I'm like a tuna person. So anything and everything with tuna is great. But there's one they make with like beef on it. And yes, I eat meat. I'm sorry. Like, I'm a meat eater. Like, I'm trying.
It sounds ideal.
You know, and it's like, there's like beef on it, and then like, I like chilies, so I like put jalapenos on it. This is all like, I'm really, yeah. And then I get like tomato and like cheese, and that's like perfect for me. I think it's pastrami. Is it pastrami? I would Google it if I had time. So that's like for me. But yeah, I'm sure I'll try vegetarian options at some point.
Yeah, at some point, you never know if elected, you might have a whole year, you know, you could treat yourself, try something new. But on that note, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. We really appreciate it. I just want to say to anyone watching, obviously polls are open all the way through this week up until Friday at 7 o'clock. So make sure you'll vote. The link is at the bottom, warwicksu.com/vote. It is the single transferable vote system, so make sure you do rank each of your candidates for each of the roles, so you definitely get the most out of your vote. But Shingai, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. We really appreciate it, and I wish you the best of luck for the rest of the campaign.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Take care.
Across campus, online, and on 12:51 AM. This is your student radio station.